All right, so today I'm going to do a quick talk about how you can do some OAuth stuff with the CDN version of the ArcGIS map components for SDK. No, ArcGIS maps SDK for JavaScript components. It's a mouthful, I know. Anyway, okay, so every now and then, ever since Dev Summit, I've gotten a few questions about using map components in various different ways, right? One of the key points with the map components that I tried to stress is the fact that you can use them just about anywhere, meaning that you could use it in your own custom applications. You can use them with just about any framework. You can also use them via the CDN to make very simple single page apps. Maybe you don't have a very complicated application, but you want to kind of compose a bunch of components together to build a map out, to add some, like maybe directions or search or something like that. You could even use the, spin up some JavaScript, import some stuff directly from the ArcGIS Maps SDK, instantiate a feature layer, and add that layer to the map, and do a bunch of other stuff like that, right? The point is, I had questions come up about what do I do about OAuth, right? There's not an OAuth component. There's not an API key component. So how do you handle that particular situation when you are building these components? So let's go ahead and cover some of that, right? So here what I've got is a very basic application using the map components. It's loading them via the CDN here. And I'm also loading the maps SDK for JavaScript via the CDN here, right? So I've got my map. I have a expand component here and the search, and I have a legend in here. Now I'm not going to add any data to this that needs authentication, because honestly I don't want to go through the trouble of like clicking that cancel button on the side that pops up all the time. But let me show you a few, well, not a few. Let me show you two ways you can do type of authentication stuff. First, we'll start with how do you set the API key, right? So here's one way to do it. What you can do is that before the script tag loads for the Maps SDK for JavaScript, you can add another script tag. So we're going to do that now. Okay, so here's my first script tag, and in here, I can actually define a global object. Now I could do that via window or just using the var keyword. So I'm going to say var esri-config is going to be equal to, and I'm going to create an object. Okay, so in this object, very simple. I can just define a property called API key. And this API key is going to be whatever my API key is. Now I'll run it, and I don't think anything's going to happen. All right, so when you provide an invalid API key, it's essentially the same as saying provide invalid token. So we're going to send that API key to the portal, because we assume we're going to need it for something. Now, if it's a valid token, you would just go ahead and everything would just work, right? Because your token would be good for whatever you set up for, and it would exist, but it doesn't. This is not a valid token, so it's not going to work, right? So you can see that this actually is doing what I expected to do. I should put a valid API key in here, and then my web map and my search and everything else that needs it would actually work. So let's go ahead and remove this now, and now we're good to go. Run it again, and I clear the errors here, and my map should load. Okay, perfect. Just what I wanted to do. Now another thing you can do, another way to do this, is you can actually do this via just plain JavaScript. Might be a little trickier to do. So if I create an async function here, I'm going to call this function load because I'm so creative. Okay, now in here what I can do is I can say const esri-config. It's going to be equal to, and I made this an async function because I want to do an await. Now on the AMD CDN, there is a special global that you can use to import your modules. And that global is going to be $, ArcGIS import, and in here I can say esri/config. Now there's it's really only documented in like one place in the Maps SDK for JavaScript right now. This $ArcGIS import, that's under the patterns and programming section of the components documentation. We'll get some more doc in there in the next release still about this. But again, this is only available in the AMD CDN script tag for the Maps SDK of JavaScript. Now, once I do this, I can go ahead and do the same thing I did before. Say esri config.api key. It's going to be equal to, oops, if I could type, and like so, save that, run it again, and if I did this right, I should see a similar error. Exactly. Message invalid token, right? So I sent a bad token to the request and it all failed. All right, so that was dealing with the API key. You could also do the same thing for OAuth authentication, right? So if you want to import the identity manager and set the OAuth for maybe some layers, editing you're going to have in your app, something like that, and you want to use the map components, I would use the same pattern with something like this load function. So let me go ahead and show it to you right now. All right, so here what I'm going to do is at the load function, I'll say const, I'm just going to type out the full thing. Identity manager is going to be equal to await, and it's $ArcGIS import, and it's going to be I believe this is under esri/identity/identity manager. And you're also going to want to bring in something like the well, you want the auth info. You need to provide the identity some OAuth information. So I'm going to type not auth info, OAuth. Let's stick with the proper names here. And it's going to look just like the other $sign import. So arcgis.import esri/identity/OAuth info. All right. And at this point, I should have these functions, right? So I'm going to say load auth here. And just to show that's there, I'll do double bang identity manager to just list out true. And if I want to make sure that I loaded this before the component, you can do something like this. I can go to console.log, double bang, custom elements dot get ArcGIS map. Now, if the component is already defined, then this should return true. But we want it to be false. I'll show you that in a second here. So let's go and run this. So it's going to load. So identity manager is true, but the map is already loaded at this point, meaning that there's a possibility that the data that needs OAuth authentication in my map is going to possibly get loaded before I've had a chance to load the identity manager and set up my OAuth. So that's a little tricky. So how do I get around this? Okay, so at this point, when I run it, my custom element for the map has already been loaded, and my OAuth has too. Now, let me check something here. Let's try this. If I move this before I actually log this out, so let's assume that it's somewhere in this block I do the work, right, to set up my OAuth authentication. So let's clear this, run it. Okay, so at this point, yes, I've loaded my identity manager, I've loaded my OAuth info, but before I've had a chance to do the work to pass any OAuth information to the identity manager, my map component has already been defined and loaded. Now, it may not be ready yet. I could try a couple things. I could try to add a defer attribute to the script tag. That might work. If I'm lucky, that could work, but you can see here, in this case, it's not. Technically, there could be some data running behind the scenes, right? So the element already exists. So, okay, how can I fix this to be sure that I load my identity manager, set up the OAuth info before the map component is loaded? I can do that by doing a dynamic import of this file, right? So we're going to go ahead, we're going to comment this out. If I clear this, run it, nothing's going to happen. I won't have a map. It's completely empty. No, it's not defined. I load my OAuth. I'm good to go. Now what I can do is when I'm done loading my OAuth, I can just do import. A direct dynamic import, not a $$ ArcGIS import. This is a direct ESM dynamic import of that file. So save that. Let's clear this up. And we're going to run it again. It's false. I've gone through the steps to dynamically to set my OAuth, which is true here. And now my application should be set up with the identity manager and the OAuth to get everything done I need to do. Let's double check it down here. I'm not sure if it'll be, it should be defined, I believe, when I do an await here. Let's do a check again. So this is my another check right after I load the OAuth. Let's run this here. And yeah, you see my elements are not defined. I load my identity manager, set up all my authentication, then dynamically import the map components JavaScript that's going to define my component, and then it's going to be defined and ready to go. My map loads. So by the time it gets to this step here, my authentication identity manager should be all set up and ready to go. All right. So those are a couple of ways you can deal with API keys and authentication, identity manager in your AMD CDN applications for the ArcGIS Maps SDK for JavaScript components. I know, it's a mouthful. I'm getting used to it, man. But basically the idea here is that API key is pretty straightforward. I can set up my API key in a global as reconfig. I can even set up the portal URL, so it'll set up the global portal for all of my application use. Identity manager and OAuth, a little trickier in an AMD CDN application because the defer attribute on the script tag, not 100% reliable. It is possible that data in the map will start loading before I actually have a chance to do my identity manager, but I can do a dynamic import on the map components JavaScript that's going to define the elements till after I've done what I need to do with the identity manager to set all that up. The safest route is to do that. Okay, so if you got any questions, please feel free to drop them down below. Please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.